Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second session of our new series. This is Israel at a Crossroads, and we are expanding the conversation. This is based on conversations that we had at our last convening, which took place at the beginning of April. And this convening was exploring kind of the big issues at stake in Israel. And today's session really is expanding the conversation of two of the sessions that we had in terms of pluralism in Israeli society and minority rights. And I think one of the things that came out of our experience at the convening was that so many of these sessions were providing so many questions and so many challenges, but there wasn't a great time to find the relief of where is cohesion. So I'm really excited that we have Dr. Elan Ezrachi with us today to look for those moments of possible coming together. And what are the ways in which this is happening, and what are the ways that we see those moments of cohesion? My name is Ellie Gettinger. I am the Director of Outreach for the Center for Lifelong Learning at JTS. And we are so excited to have you guys as part of this learning community. Thank you to everyone who donated as part of their registration. I want to give a particular thank you to Barbara and Arthur Hoffman, who sponsored this session in loving memory of their daughter, Carolyn Hoffman. The support of people like Barbara and Arthur make it possible for us to continue to provide this kind of education. So please, if you're so inclined, you can click the button and register and sponsor a future session. So let's get to what our program today is all about. As I said, this is a program that's looking at the questions of cohesion and fragmentation. In fact, the title is Israeli Society Between Cohesion and Fragmentation. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Elan Ezrachi, a Jerusalem-based veteran Jewish Peoplehood educator. He's a researcher and an executive, and he has been part of so many different organizations and processes over his career. We actually just determined in the waiting room that he was integral in establishing a program that I was a part of when I was in high school, and so it's kind of amazing. We were in the same room and we didn't know. And recently, he has been teaching Israelis about contemporary trends in America. He's been translating kind of American Jewish life to an Israeli audience. He also recently published a novel, Hashlicha, the Emissary, which is about a young woman who was sent to New York in the early 1980s as a shaliach to work with Jewish students in New York campuses. We're going to have a couple of breaks for questions throughout the session. One will be in the middle, so you can send your questions to me, and I will share them with Dr. Ezrachi when we take a short break, and then we'll have questions at the end. Also, for technical questions, you can message either me or my fabulous colleague, Tani Schwartz-Harman. The sources for today, we're going to be sharing them both visually, but also in the chat. So feel free to pull them down if you prefer to read them on your own terms. They're also in on our website, so they live there permanently. And you can check out the videos of previous sessions there. And we are so excited to have you here today. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ezrachi without further ado. Thank you all so much for being with us today.
Hello, and greetings from Jerusalem. First of all, thank you, Barbara, for sponsoring this. I have very fond memories from our meeting in Allentown, Pennsylvania, a little over a year ago, I think. And Barbara was kind enough to take me to the cemetery in Allentown where my grandparents and great-grandmother are buried, and it was very moving for me. I have an American part of in my biography. My mother grew up in Allentown and made Aliyah in 1949. And there she met my father, and I'm a product of that hybrid. I think I recognize a few other faces or names, but I don't think I have too much time to go into that because we have a very loaded session, and hopefully I'll be able to also be coherent. I have to admit that when I was approached by Ellie to do the session, she asked me for a title, and I don't know went into my head when I chose to discuss the question of cohesion or fragmentation. Like, what did I get myself into? But I guess I can only blame myself here. And I hope I'll be able to deliver a message which is both a combination of hope, but without skipping the challenges, the issues, the concerns that we all share in these very difficult days. But before I do that, I'd like to say that I have been observing in the past few weeks a process that I've never seen in the United States in such an intensive way, and that is the elections for the World Zionist Congress. I assume some of you, many of you, maybe all of you, are aware of the fact that there were these primary elections taking for this somewhat archaic, what we thought was a dead body called the Zionist Movement or the Zionist Congress, but somehow, because of all kinds of reasons that I won't go into, it actually penetrated American Jewish life, perhaps not in every place of American Jewish life, but certainly in large numbers. And what really took me by surprise is that, because it's a political campaign, that there were 21 American slates running for the World Zionist Congress. So I guess the issues of fragmentation and cohesion are not only the domain of Israel. And I wish if you voted, I wish that your votes will be effective, because this is also another way to influence what is happening in Israel these days. So obviously I'm going to talk about the two very polarized domains, cohesion and fragmentation. And I guess we should start with a little bit of good news, then go to the bad news, and then go maybe back into good news with some kind of a question mark whether the good news is still effective. And we'll break once or twice for some Q&A. So without further ado, I will share a few images. It's not a PowerPoint with information, but I want us to get into the subject with some imagery, because sometimes the pictures say more. And I'll start, as I said, with somewhat of a good news. And I want to take you, just let me know if you see the slide. Okay. I want to take you to an event that took place in Jerusalem exactly 8 days ago. It was a week from yesterday, before yesterday. This was a very spontaneous gathering, and I'll quickly read the Hebrew title here. It says, "Singing an evening of singing, nakimi politica, devoid of politics, without politics." And the big line, the thick line, is "Meuchadim u'machzirim," united and returning. And the explanation is 6 families of those hostages who were killed, who were murdered in the tunnel in Rafah, are calling the entire people of Israel to come between Yom HaShoah and Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron, to Kikar Safa, which is the hall in front of City Hall building in Jerusalem, on the 27th of April, which was exactly 8 days ago. Only together we will be able to bring back all the hostages. Now, I assume you remember that, I think it was August 31st, there was this horrendous incident in which IDF soldiers went into one of the tunnels and found these 6 wonderful, beautiful young people basically glued to one another and murdered by Hamas. And if you know them, some of them became really kind of our companions in many ways. If you know them and if you recognize them, you can also tell and realize that they were very different from one another. They lived in different communities, they were different ages, different ethnic backgrounds, different religious affiliations, but they found themselves tragically united in the tunnel. And this juxtaposition between their diversity and the unity of their tragic ending brought, now take a look at the picture to the left of the text. This brought, without any announcements, only through social media, 6,000 people to City Hall in Jerusalem. And on the stage, for every one of those killed hostages, a member of the family came up and gave some kind of a message of unity. And between that, we sang songs. There was kind of like a public prayer, vigil, get together. I really don't have all the words to describe it. It was extremely moving. It was extremely powerful. It was very authentic. It was organized bottom up. And this message of bottom up is going to be very prominent in my presentation. So I thought we can start with this and feel the unity and the cohesion through this very uncontrolled, very spontaneous gathering that got together within days. But let's now go to the harder stuff, because if we look at least at Zionist history, I'm not going to go into Jewish history, I don't have time for that, and there are other experts who can do perhaps a better job. We do have also a history of violence, of solving disputes and differences through force or through an approach, an attitude that my way is the only way and your way has no right to be on this earth, and therefore I either ignore you or I kill you. And that is something which we have to recognize that we have also in our history. I chose a few images just to kind of go down the timeline before I go back to some of the good news. So, this is a very famous image from 1948 when the Altalena ship comes to the shores of Tel Aviv, sponsored by the Irgun, the Etzel, bringing weapons in a way that was perceived by Ben Gurion and the leadership of Israel at the time. Israel was just a few weeks old, as some kind of a rebellious anti-government activity. There are lots of debates what happened there, but this ship was bombed by the young Israeli military after negotiations to come with some kind of compromise about the weapons that were on the machine, on the ship. And this is a scene from the shore of Tel Aviv, that great city that has seen not only wonderful life, but also some very tragic moments like this. Another moment which is more forgotten is 1957. A hand grenade was thrown in the assembly hall of the Knesset building. It was not where the Knesset is today. It's on King George Street in Jerusalem. And it was a very tense time in Israel, the first decade of the country. There were a lot of tensions between different ethnic groups, between new immigrants and the veterans, reparations from Germany, and the stakes were very high. The energies and the anger and some people took the law into their hands. And by the way, even Ben Gurion was slightly injured in this event. Another one that we can recall is the Black Panthers of the early 1970s. These are the Israeli Black Panthers. This was a movement inspired in a way by the American Black Panthers, which also led to very tense riots, both on the level of the rioters and also the police reaction to it. Before that, there was another incident which I didn't bring here in picture, from Haifa. It was the Wadi Salib riots in 1953, I believe. Moving right along, we have the 1983 murder of a protester in a peace rally. I circled his face. His name was Emil Greenzweig, and this was one of the rallies after the Lebanon War of 1982. As a matter of fact, I attended that rally, but I left a little earlier because my baby was just born, my first child, and I had to go put her to sleep. And this happened here in Jerusalem, not far from the Knesset building. A political murder by an assassin who was caught later on. Of course, throughout the years, and I didn't bring pictures, there's some violent events between ultra-Orthodox and non-ultra-Orthodox, and you probably know that. And of course, we cannot forget the assassination of a prime minister in Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, in 1995, and everything that made Israel different. The day after we realized that someone from our tribe can actually murder a prime minister, who's not only a persona but also a symbol of Israeli democracy and so on and so forth. And finally, I'll just, I'm doing this in a very kind of haphazard way. Finally, we had the event that took place 5 days ago, which I assume you have taken some notice of, and that is an event, an alternative Yom HaZikaron ceremony, Memorial Day ceremony that focuses on Palestinian and Israeli bereaved families. And there was a screening that took place. The event was actually in Jaffa, and it went uninterrupted. But there was screening in various parts of the country. And the screening that took place in a Reform synagogue in Ra'anana, a very kind of sleepy middle-class town, was attacked by mobs of people who came to disrupt it, even though it was in a sort of a private place and it was not something that interfered with other events, but this was kind of the climate of the day. And before I move on, I'll close this set of sort of harsh slides, and if there are any questions or anything that came up until now, I can address them now.
There was a question about the context of the Israeli Black Panthers, and if that was something that you could give a little bit of background to, because it's something that I wasn't particularly familiar with. So
happy to address that. So in general, look, I would say that Israel is a very complex social experiment. To use a Martin Buber phrase that he said once on the kibbutz, he said the kibbutz is an experiment that hasn't failed. And you can hear also the little nuance here. And in some ways, I would say, and this maybe is the theme of my talk, Israel is a social experiment that hasn't failed. Has it succeeded? Is it guaranteed success for the future? That I will leave as a question mark. But it hasn't failed. And here is the context. From really the late 1940s into the 70s, Israel became one of the most diverse populations in the world from an ethnic background point of view, but under the narrative of we're all Jews and we're Am Echad and we're the gathering of the exiles. So, but it came to the day-to-day life, social gaps, economic gaps, ethnic differences, religious differences, the lack of equity between the privileged and the non-privileged created huge social tensions throughout the 50s, 60s, into the 70s, and to a certain degree even until today, and I don't have time to go into the current ones. And in the early 1970s, there were a group of young activists from Jerusalem, from one of the impoverished neighborhoods in Jerusalem, who were very angry at the fact that they cannot get into the system, they can't get good education, they can't get proper housing for their families, and they started protesting, and some very nice children of American immigrants who heard about the Panthers said, "Call yourself Black Panthers. That will bring you some kind of rating and that's how they got there.
There was, and would you say that the group was primarily Mizrahi versus the Ashkenazi?
Oh yeah, absolutely, definitely Mizrahi, mostly North African, because the North Africans were the Mizrahi group that came the latest in the whole series of Mizrahi immigration. The Iraqis came before, the Yemenites came before, and the North Africans were the ones who felt the harshest level of discrimination and feeling left out. May I continue?
I think yes, please.
Wonderful. So I started with kind of, pounding on our heads with a very heavy hammer. But I want to go into, and of course, what the common denominator of what I showed before is that there's a huge political tension, a lot of passion, a lot of anger, and that allows people in certain times, in certain situations, sometimes even establishment, because it also can be also the establishment that is harsh, to use the method of violence. But what about being a family? What about being in a community? Do we have that? Do we have a sense of some kind of unity that can create boundaries and put some kind of a certain check and balance to the situation? So perhaps now we can move to the source sheet that I prepared, because I brought some interesting sources so I understand that you're going to operate the source sheet. Tani, am I correct?
Yep, just give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up.
If there's a problem, I can do it also. And actually, I'm going to start with a little bit of humor. I think we need to lighten up a bit. Here we go. So we're going to take a look at source number 1. If you can just scroll a bit. Wonderful. Maybe it can also be a little larger. Perfect. I hope you're all comfortable seeing the size of the and the source. The first source is from someone who you may have read over the years. He sadly passed away a few years ago. He was a very close friend of ours, a journalist and a book critic and an author by the name of Stuart Schaffman. Grew up in New York, made Aliyah, lived here in Jerusalem, and wrote for the Jerusalem Report. And in 1997, he wrote this satire about what's called the best country in the world, the best country on earth. It had 10 points. What makes Israel special? They're all very funny and satirical. And the last point is the point that is the 3 lines that are brought here. And it kind of captures the Israeli mindset about cohesion and fragmentation. And it says the following: only in Israel will a person drive like a maniac, run you off the road into a ditch, screech to a halt, leap from his car, rip off his shirt and make you a tourniquet, then drive you to the hospital and give you a transfusion of his own blood. I don't think I need to go into further explanation about the irony of the person who pushes you and then takes care of you. The second quote is actually very similar to the first quote. It comes in 2012 from the famous novelist Amos Oz, also of blessed memory, where he says the following. If you can bring it up, Tani, a bit to the center of the screen. Wonderful. It says, I was called a traitor numerous times in my life, and he was very much a critical voice on the left liberal side of Israel, and therefore he occasionally was treated in a very harsh way. I believe that I'm in good company, he says. Many people who were ahead of their time were accused as being traitors by their opponents. So that's kind of his opening statement of who he is and how he's positioned in the broader Israeli discourse. But then he says something which is kind of surprising. He says, I love Israel even when I can't stand her. If I'm doomed to fall one day in the street, I'd rather fall in a street in Israel, not in London, not in Paris, not in Berlin, and not in New York. Here I will be lifted up. When I will stand back on my feet, there will certainly be not a few who will wish that I fall again. But if I fall again, they will lift me up again. And here again, I think Oz, in a very similar way to Schaffman, captures a sentiment that that I think is still valid, although I think we are in a very risky time. And the sentiment is that we can't stand each other, but we can't be away from one another. And when we're challenged, we actually help each other in a very profound way. By the way, if you want indications of this in other more practical terms, when you have situations around the world, let's say there's some kind of a nature disaster in Nepal or in Latin America and things like that, or some horrible terror attack, very quickly the Israeli media will ask, were there Israelis there? And once it's clear that there's some Israelis in distress, people here will start doing anything possible to help one another, to find ways to keep us in this togetherness, even though, as Amos Oz says, we can't stand each other. So the togetherness and we can't stand each other seem to be going hand in hand. Now, going further beyond these two quotes and some of the anecdotes, the question is, can we actually explain what's going on here from a more of a, I would say, a theoretical perspective? We're not in an academic setting per se, but there are ways to possibly explain why we are in a situation in which we can be so conflicted and at the same time with some strong sense of cohesion, or at least some sense of solidarity. And here I brought in the sources two theoretical source explanations that might expand the attempt to explain what's going on here. And if you don't mind, Tani, go to source, I think number 6, it's towards the end, where it says imagined communities. Skip, move that, we'll get back to that. Yeah, number 6. So here I go to one of the rebbes, one of the leading, also passed away, leading scholars of political science, political sociology, Benedict Anderson, who coined the term imagined community. It's a very famous book from 1983. And imagined community, as it says in the second line, depicts a nation as a socially constructed community imagined by the people who perceive themselves as part of a group. In other words, I know that I have an affinity with another Israeli who might be in Haifa or in Beersheba or in Palo Alto, because what works here is my political imagination, knowing and thinking that we're part of some kind of a shared category called nation. As imagined, an imagined community, he says, does not mean that a national community is fake, but rather refers to the position that any community so large, because we're talking about millions now, that its members do not know each other on face-to-face basis, must imagine to be so in some degree. So here I would say that one of the successes of Zionism, in the line of Martin Buber, an experiment that hasn't failed, is that it did manage to create on the Israeli, and now I will expand it later on to the Jewish peoplehood domain as well, but in the Israeli sense, it managed to create a sense of an imagined community for millions of people who can really hate each other in many ways, or be definitely very distant from one another. But when it comes to the true test of who is in and who is out, then the imagination creates the boundaries of this category. And I would even dare say, even though it's not really our conversation, that even Israeli Arabs, a minority that we're in a national conflict with, in certain instances are are part of our imagined community. In other words, the Israeliness includes Israeli Palestinians as well, not all the time and not in every situation, but it's definitely one of the, I would say, outcomes of the Zionist project, the creation of the State of Israel, and the cumulative experiences of Israelis over the years. So one explanation is why do we have some level of cohesion to the point that we can lift our opponent up from the street after falling, is this sense of imagined community. The second theoretical source, and now if you can scroll back, Tani, to, I think, source number 3, I believe. Maybe they're not numbered well, but go up again. Some reason the numbering is not. This one, yes, civil religion. And here, first of all, I'll start with the experience, and then I'll talk about the theory. A few days ago, we had Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. It so happened that on Yom HaZikaron, we also had a massive fire, but let's put that aside. And one of the, I don't know how many of you have been in Israel on Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, which is the day before Yom HaAtzmaut. It's a very, very loaded, intense, sad, but also very beautiful day that really brings the spirit of this imagined community together. And one of the moments of, here I use the sacred moments of the day is the siren. Again, a siren has been tested here also as, or manifested as the warning for the incoming rocket from Yemen, and that can happen also. But the siren of Yom HaZikaron, 11 o'clock in the morning, on Yom HaZikaron, 2 minutes, the entire country comes to a standstill. And Tani, if you can also bring the pictures a bit up, but also leave me the text so I can read it. Or maybe it's my gallery that I can move a bit. Okay, and here I'll just summarize what this moment is. The 2-minute Yom HaZikaron siren is a profound sacred moment that encapsulates the story of Israel. This is a text that I wrote, so I'm kind of quoting myself. Society comes to a complete standstill in a private and public sphere to commemorate the fallen soldiers and victims of terror acts. The siren used for this ritual has resonance to the traditional shofar. The siren and other collective rituals have been developed in Israel since 1948, and they are part, and this is my second theoretical premise here of what keeps us somewhat together, of civil religion. It's a form of a civil religion. Now, civil religion, you may have studied this in college many years ago, is a term coined by an American sociologist called Robert Bellah, who identified that in addition to your religion of choice or of tradition, whoever you are, the nation also has a religious domain. It's a secular domain, but it has spiritual attributes to it. And here in the unbolded letters, it says civil religion is a set of explicit and implicit sacred religious values of a nation. And here, very quickly, I'll just read a little more, is expressed through public rituals, symbols, practices, and ceremonies on sacred days and in sacred places. And here I would argue that Israel has managed very quickly, sadly also because of outside catastrophes that came upon us, to develop a very rich language of a civil religion that can work both top down in terms of government agencies and organizations and establishments designing various rituals and ceremonies, but also bottom up. People individually create all kinds of memorialization initiatives. There's a picture which was in the previous slide, and I won't bring it up just because of time, of all these stickers that are now being being produced by families of bereaved soldiers or people who lost their lives in the Nova festival or in the kibbutzim around Gaza, and they're pasted all over the place in Israel, on bus stops and telephone poles and every place you can actually put a sticker on, you see that. So this sense of ritualization of our collective experience is still working up to a point, of course, and we have it. This is a treasure that I think Israel has managed to achieve in a fairly short time. So these are the two theoretical foundations that I think explain why there's a relative high degree of cohesion, and maybe you want to replace it with solidarity, while at the same time there are also huge pressures of fragmentation and conflict. The next level I want to take this discussion into, and I have about 10 minutes before I want to really open for Q&A and my responses to that, comes to a very interesting attempt that was made by Israel's former president, Reuven Ruby Rivlin, and I think it's source number 3 here, Tani, and the way it's numbered here. Rivlin was very interesting. He's now in his late 80s, still very active, although he is no longer the president. He comes from the right wing of Israel. He's a student of Jabotinsky, and he addressed a conference that took place in Herzliya. It's called the Herzliya Conference in 2015, when it became already evident that Israeli society is really moving in different directions. And he came up with a concept that I wouldn't say is sociologically profound. And I would probably imagine that sociologists would think it's very superficial and inaccurate and so forth, but it definitely helped the discourse in Israel in a very powerful way. And he basically said that the Israeli society is actually comprised of 4 tribes. He used the word tribe, which is a kind of ancient biblical term, and the 4 tribes don't really fit the idea of cohesion in a simple way. You have to think of something new in order to build up cohesion among the four tribes. So what are the 4 tribes? Let's read it quickly. Today, the first grade classes in the elementary schools in Israel are composed of about 38% secular Jews, about 15% national religious, that is what you would call in America modern Orthodox, about 1/4 Arabs, and close to 1/4 of Haredim, ultra-Orthodox. The demographic processes that are restructuring or redesigning the shape of Israeli society have in fact created a new Israeli order, said the president of Israel in his attempt to be a sociologist. A reality in which there is no longer a clear majority nor a clear minority group. A reality in which Israeli society is comprised of 4 population sectors, or if you will, 4 principal tribes, essentially different from each other, and growing closer in size. The mutual ignorance and lack of common language between these 4 populations that are becoming even more similar in size merely increases the tension, fear, hostility, and the competitiveness between them. In simpler words, he said, there is no such thing as Israelis as one community. Put aside the imagined community, civil religion, we're actually 4 distinct groups that are becoming similar in size. We can talk about the numbers if you want, but it's not that important. And these groups live very separate life within the tiny Israel. They speak even different languages. They have different schools. They have different cultural and religious affiliations. They vote for different political parties, and they are what Israeli society is about. And therefore, here I will just supplement that. said Rivlin, we must do something in order to build the overarching Israeli identity, which every different group will feel equally partnered in this shared endeavor, and at the same time will know that there are other groups that are very different than them. So this is a very different modality than classical Zionism, which talked about unity and the melting pot and the integration of everybody into one group. Basically, Rivlin said, forget it. There is no such thing as one group in Israel. We are 4 tribes. And now we're going to begin to move into the global aspect of this theory, because what Rivlin said was primarily directed to Israeli listeners. But then a couple of years later, there was a terrible crisis, as you remember, in 2017, when Israel reneged on the compromise over the use of the Western Wall, where there was a compromise that was supposed to allow for an egalitarian section. You probably remember all that. And there was huge animosity and anger in many diaspora communities around the world about Israel, about the Israeli government, about the fact that there's no sensitivity, no understanding of the needs, of the interest, of the emotions of Jews around the world. And Rivlin was attending the General Assembly of North American Federations in Los Angeles. And Tani, if you can bring the number 4 text up. And one of the things he tried to do is fix some of the breakdowns of this tension. But he threw in another concept in his creative way of addressing it. And it says, it pains me that the symbol of unity, the Wailing Wall, and here again we have a symbol of unity in our hands, and we're questioning, is the wall really a symbol of unity, or is it a symbol of fragmentation? He says, this symbol of unity, the Wailing Wall, became the symbol of dispute and lack of common ground. The new Israeli order, remember it from the previous text, is a huge economic challenge for Israel, but no less than that, it is a social and ideological challenge. How to achieve a common language and a sense of belonging for every sector. I believe that the challenge of creating a partnership between the 4 tribes is one of the most significant challenges that Israel faces. And then came his punchline. When we face this challenge, we need your partnership. And you are the 5th tribe, diaspora Jewry. So here, Rivlin expanded the sense of the boundaries of the imagined community to include diaspora Jewry as a tribe, as a category. Now, of course, there are many differences between Jews in various diasporas and within diasporas, but he actually formulated here as one category. We move on, and by the way, I want to apologize that all the sources that I brought here, except for one maybe, are written by men. It's not my habit, but it so happened that they came one after the other, and I promise you, if you invite me again, that I will improve my ways. The next text, which is newer, from 2022, comes from a very prominent figure in the Israeli intellectual community, Professor Yedidia Stern, who's a law professor at Bar Ilan University and is also the president of the Jewish Policy Institute. It's a think tank here in Jerusalem that looks at world Jewry and Israel and the relationship. And he took on Rivlin's theory and I would say tweaked it a bit, perhaps also arguing with it. And he says that tribalism, this idea that Rivlin threw in, was actually, it's not a good way to design our social construction. Tribalism, he says, takes a heavy toll on us. It weakens solidarity between the different segments of society because in some ways, he says, Rivlin celebrated the existence of tribes. It erodes our internal cohesion and undermines national resilience. Indeed, the controversy of a vision should not be ignored. We are very diverse in our visions and the way we see basic issues, but it should not become the main story. Rather, we must act to strengthen the commonalities between us. And here, I think he comes up with a very good formulation, which I like. He says we should do it on two levels. One, the Israeli cohesion, forging areas of national consensus between all Israeli citizens, even on controversial issues, with a commitment to mutual tolerance. And here there's a very strong hint to inclusion of Israeli Arabs. The second level is Jewish cohesion, which entails reinforcing the bridge between Israel and diaspora Jewry while broadening the agenda of a shared peoplehood based on a common identity, despite specific disagreements over concrete issues such as the Western Wall. And this is a proposal for how we can work together in order to achieve some form of civility within the diversity that we have. Finally, before I entertain some comments or questions, I want to say something about American Jewry in all this, and I assume that the same, and I'll go back to what I said before: the 21 slates to the World Zionist Congress. But American Jews were, for many years, either brought up or were very committed to the idea of unity and supporting Israel from a standpoint of unity. Some of us in the room might have some memories from 1967, and there are really some great moments of a sense that Israel not only needs us, but also Israel brings about the unity, the uniting forces within us, and it's something that that we should cherish and we should work on, and it's mobilizing us and so forth. But of course, we know it's not true. We know that Israel has, shortly after 67, probably sometime in the late 1970s into the 80s, started being also a source of controversy, and it's very hard to create a wall-to-wall solidarity with Israel. I pulled out from my bookcase one book that appeared 9 years ago. It's called Trouble in the Tribe: The American Jewish Conflict Over Israel. Dov Waxman, the political scientist, is now in UCLA, and he already analyzes the extent to which Israel is a source of controversy rather than a source of unity, and that caught American Jews, of course, in a difficult situation because they need to do both. They need to advance the ideas that they believe in, whatever they are, and they also have to stand by Israel in certain times. After October 7th, of course, there was a window of unity that really reminded us of those, you can say, the good old days. And I'm actually holding here a report that was done in Israel for Israelis about how American Jews stood by Israel in the first month of the war, and it says, Omdim Meuchadim, standing united, American Jewry and Israel in the first month of the war. It was published by the Ruderman Foundation for Israelis to appreciate how American Jews were standing behind Israel. But of course, we know that Israel now is also a source of controversy, and we have to work between these two poles. And I would say, similar to the way Israelis manage themselves between a sense of cohesion and community, and I believe that my way is right and everybody else is wrong, I would say that American Jews should be no different than that. On the one hand, they should support the Israeli project because it's our project. It was created by World Jewry in order to resolve some of the key challenges of life, of Jewish existence. And at the same time, whatever you believe in religiously, intellectually, in terms of your social values and so forth, find your partner in Israel, support the cause that speaks to you, and that will not take away any any aspect of the solidarity and the cohesion, because we must build the cohesion while recognizing the diversity among us. I don't see any other way. Otherwise, we're just lying to ourselves. Tani, you can close this PDF, and I think I will stop here and drink some mayim. Back
My
to you.
mouse, I'm sorry, my mouse got lost in the shuffle of my screens. So in thinking about this presentation of which there are moments of cohesion, moments of uncohesion, I'm kind of curious about how does Dr. Stern, within that piece, does he actually have a sense of proposition for what we can do to develop Israeli cohesion and Jewish cohesion? Is there something specific that he's putting forth in that universe? Just because it feels like in so many, and I think the same is true in American culture, that we're like, but we got to come together. But it's, how do you come together when there are such enormous differences and distinctions?
Yes, so Yedida Stern on the Israeli front is very vocal, and you hear him a lot in various platforms. And his main charge is the desperate need to create a constitution in Israel. The fact that we don't have a constitutional foundation in which we can basically fight over things, but we know that the constitution is protecting us from full disintegration, and the fact that we don't have a constitution is a very weak point, and therefore, because he's also a law professor, his main thrust is go in that direction, and of course protect all the safeguards of democracy and the gatekeepers and things that might sound familiar in the American discourse today. So that's what he would say, I think, in the Israeli front. In the Jewish Peoplehood front, I would imagine, although I can't remember exactly something that he said in this regard, that he would say, let's find mechanisms to resolve issues that are shared by world Jewry. And issues that are shared by world Jewry are not war and peace. They're usually things that have to do with issues of, let's say, conversion, the Western Wall, the law of return, pluralism, and how it's manifested in Israel, how we teach about each other, things like that. I assume he would argue for that.
Yeah. So actually, to that point, one of our participants asked, are the issues of religious or political disagreement, divisions, the greater problem, socially?
So here we also have, like, I would say, an optical, not illusion, an optical distortion, because, and I think here America and Israel are somewhat in a similar place. In the good days, we argued over ideas. And we could be very passionate about ideas, or when I say ideas, it's not just philosophy, it's also political ideas and policies, and that was really what drove people to be on this side or on another side. Sadly, in the last in Israel, I think it started a little earlier, we went into what is called identity politics. And identity politics is first of all, which leader do you think is either bringing redemption to our lives or destroying us? So it's, are you Bibi or not Bibi? Are you Trump or are you not Trump? And that makes the conversation much less thematic and much more based on personality, and on emotion, the emotion of who do you feel that is yours and who is the other. And the other is a villain, the other side. And that is very tragic and also very dangerous, because that can incite people to act in a much more aggressive way, possibly violent way. And sadly, the leadership, and now I'll talk about Israel, is very much pumping this this kind of divide, which is not based on ideas so much, but based on allegiances. So the answer is, even though we do have very strong religious differences and differences over the question of how to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, specifically with Gaza, but also in the broader sense, is not necessarily what we will fight over before. First, we'll say, oh, I think Bibi is the greatest, Netanyahu is the greatest leader, and the other would say, I think Netanyahu is just running us to the ground. That would be the level of the conversation.
That there's no actual discourse. It's just, we're here
yelling,
and there's
just
nothing.
Just yelling. Yeah.
But we have two questions that kind of get to that question that also kind of relate to this. One, and you're someone who explains kind of American Jewry to Israeli audiences. And so, as I'm sure you're well aware, political polarization in the US also quite high. And this questioner is finding himself mostly aligned with the values of liberalism, yet understanding that today, or feeling that today, Trump's policies towards Israel are the ones that have improved the situation of Israel and Jews in general. And so and I know within Israel, Trump is wide, the preference of Israelis is almost the preference of Jews in America towards Trump is the inverse of that in Israel. Like, I think it's like 70 and 30. I'm making this more complicated. So the question is, how do you comment on the US present situation as it relates to the Israeli public? And how do you comment on that to the Israeli public?
Yeah, so the Israeli public, which of course is very diverse, for many years has been thinking about the international community in a very Ben Gurion-esque kind of a way. What is good for Israel? And that is true about other countries as well, and other administrations in America and so forth. Whether that is a good attitude or not, I'll put it aside, because it's the way Israelis felt over the years very vulnerable. And if you're a friend or foe, was very important to us. However, I would say that since Netanyahu, during the days of Obama, took it upon himself to really go cut through the bipartisan support of Israel and portray Obama and the Democratic Party as hostile to Israel, which I believe is not true historically, and then eventually and move his attention and his discourse into the Republican Party, the evangelical Christians, and later on into Trump. He basically told Israelis a story that many Israelis absorbed and internalized as the truth, that Obama is just better for Israel than the other side. And a lot of Israelis drank this Kool-Aid, and as a result, Israel became the country that supported Trump the most in the Western world. I think Israelis are much more nuanced than that, and much more sophisticated than they know. And certainly now they know that things are not exactly as they were told, and it's now still open. Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up here, I'm sorry, I swallowed wrong. I want to kind of leave this with this question, and maybe there's a way of getting to this hopeful place, maybe there's not, but the questioner asks, I'm wondering if you are more, of course my question just flew down, I'm wondering if you are more hopeful that we, the diaspora and Israeli communities, can eventually cohere, or do you feel that our communities will break as ancient Israel did into northern and southern kingdoms?
So first of all, I was waiting for the question, are you optimistic or not? As I has been saying to many of my friends and colleagues, I know how to predict yesterday. I don't know how to predict tomorrow. But I will say, let me do a story. It so happens that under my frame, I see the gallery now. there's a woman by the name of Wendy Brezin. Are you there, Wendy? Wendy and I.
This is actually Wendy's question.
Wendy and I didn't know that, met 50 years ago when the Israeli Air Force sent me to Alabama to train to learn how to fly helicopters in a U.S. Army base. And I actually lived in Alabama when I was 19. And Wendy was a student in the University of Florida in Tallahassee. And the students in the Hillel of University of Tallahassee heard that there are Israeli air cadets, that's how we were called, who are training in a base not far from northern Florida. And we met several times, and we kept our contacts ever since. To me, that's the notion of Jewish peoplehood. Forget all those declarations. Forget all the foaming of the mouth of politicians. At the end of the day, if we have a relationship, that's why I started with Barbara also, we have the basis for the continuation of the idea of Jewish peoplehood. Clearly, we have some issues to overcome, as I didn't shy away from them, I hope. But here we are, and I'm in a reunion with Wendy. I'm very moved by the fact that I see you, and also your question. I believe you're in Jacksonville now. Is that true? And that's, I think, the message. And as a scholar of this field, I would say that despite our rhetorics, there are many more points of context between American Jews and Israelis than ever before. You mentioned, Eli, that you graduated a program. I can tell you that was the Bronfman Youth Fellowship, has Israelis in the program. Every birthright bus has Israelis. We are now in a time in which, if we want to work together, we can actually do it. So it's really incumbent on us to nurture this relationship, because there's a potential here, and I believe things are, in that sense, on the ground up level, on the face-to-face human interaction, we're doing better than we did in the past. When I grew up, even though I had an American mother, as I said before, I never met American Jews. I didn't know anything about them. I knew a bit, but most people of my cohort, we were clueless about who you were, what your life was like, what do you believe in, and if anything, we had very false, stereotypical images of who you were, and I think that has changed a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this at not quite the middle of the night, but closer to, the end of the day. And we really appreciate your perspectives. I've very much enjoyed learning with you. And it's always great to bring in our alumni who are doing amazing things all over the world.
Yes,
so
of course, I'm also an alumni of the Jewish Theological Seminary, and it gives me great pleasure to be involved with my alma mater.
Thank you all for joining us. We will be back at this next Monday. Our session next week is with Rabbi Naomi Kalish, who is the director of the Center for Pastoral Education at JTS, and one of her colleagues in Israel, Rabbi Annabelle Tenzer, who's also a graduate of the JTS Center for Pastoral Education. And they're talking about how people who are experiencing trauma also have to be part of healing that trauma. So I think it's going to be a really compelling conversation. I'm excited to have it. And it's certainly an important moment to be having when there is so much, trauma at stake. How are the people who are responsible for taking care of people being taken care of? Thank you again to Barbara and Alan Hoffman for their generous donation and support. And thank you, Dr. Ezrachi. This has been a real pleasure.